Hello and welcome back. The final introductory video for this summer course before you get your formal assignment will be discussing analyzing the standards and briefly concluding the evidence-based scoring PowerPoint. So to wrap up the evidence-based scoring, I was cut off because my video is going to be 10 minutes in length. This is a great chart that aligns the 5 core propositions for National Board and some questions that you can think about while you are collecting evidence that relate to that specific core proposition. So these, we will work through each of the examples of evidence listed in that third column as we begin components 2, 3, and 4 for your writing. But these are going to be great questions that before we introduce you to your content standards and how we should be analyzing them. So just thinking about how are you going to know who your students are and what level of learning they are at? And from taking that information that you know about students and their learning abilities, how can you create goals that will meet their learning needs and allow you to lead into the decision for what instructional strategies will be best for this group of students this year? Okay. Moving down into those other questions, figuring out once you know your students and what you're going to teach them and how you're going to teach them, what is the best method for evaluating student learning? And in that reflection piece, what would you do differently if you were given the chance to work with this group of students to teach that same content again? And what will be your next steps moving forward for the rest of the year? Again, this is the piece that allows you to come back and evaluate based on data that you've obtained, based on evaluations that the students have given for what would best meet their learning styles. So this kind of wraps up the evidence that we are thinking about and hopefully gives you some question prompts to ask yourself for what best ways could I collect evidence and what would it physically look like. So let's move into analyzing the standards, the title of this course, and where you're going to spend 90% of your time during this course. So the first thing that each of you are going to have to do is download your individual content standards. We recognize that not everyone in this summer course is going to be in the same content area, and that's perfectly fine. But we do need to make sure that you get the correct standards that you will potentially be working with for the next 2 years. So I do have the instructions laid out here, so you can revisit those and pause this video at any time. But I am going to flip back to the website so you can actually see what the layout of this is and kind of make some sense of the instructions that I've given. And again, once we get to your standards, my suggestion is there at the bottom. Please download the standards. There'll be a PDF and create a National Board folder that you can just keep placing all of your documentation into for future use. And the best suggestion while you're going to go through and read your standards would be to find a way that you can print them out and then actually go through and manipulate them with a highlighter, a pen, pencil, because that's where you're going to get the most meaning from them as opposed to just looking at them on a computer. So I'm going to flip back to the National Board website here. Okay, so we should be at boardcertifiedteachers.org. We're going to go up here to where it says what we do, drop down to Candidate Center. Then we are going to scroll down where you see first time and returning candidate resources there on the left. Click Find Out More. So these are all the candidate resources that you can dig into if you decide to continue this process with us. Keep scrolling down until you see standards and instructions. So we've reached the place where we need to figure out what your content area is going to be. Hopefully you know that already. So I'm just going to show you what mine looks like. So my area of certification was career and technical education. I'm an agriculture teacher, so it falls under this large umbrella. And then you'll see this other pop-up that comes up for developmental level. Okay, so a lot of yours could be early adolescence, like mine, so like dealing with middle and high schoolers, or I forget the term for elementary age students, but that will be your other option. So once those pop up for you, you will see things that are specific to your content area. Again, if you would want to go through and download the instructions for each of these components, you're more than welcome to over the next year and a half, we will go through and deconstruct those and make them usable. So don't totally panic. But what we are focusing on first for this entire summer is your standards. So you can click on those. It'll pop up as a large PDF. So mine were 93 pages long. Okay. I'm going to ask you just to scroll down to the table of contents for now. Again, you can see a lot of the about and like the 5 core propositions and the architecture that Belinda and I have talked about. But here's where we're really going to get into the standards that have been set for your content area. So for mine, I have 10 standards. Most content areas are going to float between 8 and 10. So I'm just going to open up the first one, knowledge of students. This is a standard that most of your areas are going to have. So it will make sense to look at this. So with this standard, probably each standard is about 2 to 3 to 4 pages long. It is going to be just a description of what the individuals from your area deem the highest standard in our profession for this content area. There's a nice summary statement up here. We're going to talk about that when we show you the document that we want to use. And then you can just see nice paragraphs of thoughts organized around that central standard for your particular area. So we'll talk more about what you should pull from these when I show you the template that we're looking at next. Okay, so I'm going to flip back to our PowerPoint here. Okay, so you have your standards downloaded, printed, ready to go. And this is going to be the chart that we've devised for you to go through and look at your standards and pull out the highlights for each of those particular standards. So you will download this template that we have in Schoology for you. In the first column, you are going to pull out key phrases that really resonate with your teaching pedagogy, with your philosophy, that relate to that particular standard. So, for example, they may mention that an effective career and technical education teacher needs to understand their students' abilities before moving forward. I would write that verbatim from the standards into my key phrases column. And then you see my current teaching, improved teaching, and then evidence. So I would list out what I'm currently doing in my teaching that relates to that phrase I've identified. So currently at the beginning of the school year, I give an interest survey to all the students so I know what interest they have in relation to the course I'm teaching. Okay, we're going to begin that reflecting piece. So thinking about if I were to improve my teaching based upon the standard that I've just read, what could I be doing to better meet this standard? So, for example, here, instead of giving my students a survey, I could send an email to all of the parents of students in that class to determine what that student's learning style is and what areas they've struggled with in the past. And finally, the evidence column. Again, what physical, tangible piece of information or observation can I write down to demonstrate that I have done my current teaching practice as it relates to the standards. So in this case, my evidence would be physical copies of the surveys that the student completed. Okay, we are recommending that you pull at least 6 key phrases verbatim from the standards listed and complete that for however many standards are included for your area. If you would like to pull more than 6, that's phenomenal. These are going to be phrases and things and ideas that you will kind of internalize and then be able to connect with as we go through components 2, 3, and 4. So please be thorough. Honestly, probably an hour per standard is what we were expecting of your work for this course. So with that, that is what we had prepared for you to analyze the standards. Please feel free to go through and start downloading one of those templates for each standard and then submitting it in the correct location provided on Schoology.